Welcome everyone to part 5 of module 9, social psychology. Today we're going to be looking at is aggression. So the first thing again, is going to be defining what we are even talking about. What do we mean when we say aggression? So in a psychological context, aggression is any physical or verbal behavior intended to harm someone physically or emotionally. One thing that's really important here is, at least psychologically, we do look at least at some level at intent, okay? We wouldn't say that carrying something heavy and dropping it and it lands on someone's foot on accident and it hurts them would be you being aggressive, right? There needs to be at least some level of intent. So what you are doing is done with the intent to harm somebody. Now, again, notice that harm and what you're actually doing, the behavior you're actually doing, can be either physical or verbal or emotional, right? So you can be doing physical behavior or verbal behavior, saying something to somebody, or and that can cause either physical or emotional damage, okay? So any of those kind of pieces are going to be connected. Now, one thing that's really important when we're talking about aggression is just pretty much like almost everything we've talked about, there can be a wide variety of what this actually looks like based on culture, based on the time period, and based on the individual people involved, right? So, for example, it wouldn't necessarily be considered like aggressive, at least in the context, right? For like two football players on the same team, right, to like hit their helmets together before the game, right? That's kind of like maybe a more socially acceptable behavior, right? In that moment, they aren't necessarily being aggressive towards each other, right? Maybe that is more of a norm in that situation, right? So you can think about how obviously there's a lot of different nuances and kind of gray areas here that we could talk about. So what we're going to look at now are different types of aggression. Now, there are 3 big types of aggression: physical aggression, verbal aggression, and relational aggression. Physical aggression is what we normally think of when someone says aggression. It is harm and control through physical damage or the threat of physical damage, right? So if someone punches somebody in the face, that would be physical aggression, right? Or if someone holds their fist up like they're going to punch somebody, that would also be considered physical aggression, right? So you can be aggressive without actually, like, literally causing physical harm, as we mentioned before. So those will both be considered physical aggression. We also have verbal aggression. So verbal aggression is communication intended to hurt another person, right? So this can be things like calling someone names or slurs or putting them down, right? Those would be things that are communication intended to hurt another person. Or a communication perceived as having that intent, right? So again, you don't necessarily have to like scream at someone for you to be verbally aggressive, right? If what you are saying or how you are saying it can be perceived as you trying to hurt that person, that could also be considered verbal aggression. When we're talking about verbal aggression, it doesn't literally just mean spoken word, although it's a part of it. It can obviously be written down as well, or even drawn, right? All of those are technically considered verbal aggression, okay? Even though they're not literally all verbal. The last example is relational aggression. So relational aggression is harming others through purposely manipulating and damaging peer relationships. So an example of this could maybe be like if someone spreads a rumor about you, right? That would be considered relational aggression. They aren't causing physical harm, and they aren't necessarily using verbal aggression towards you, right? They might not even say anything to you directly at all, but they're using relationships, right? That's the relational part, to damage you, to hurt you, right? Thus, relational aggression. Okay. We mentioned before when we were looking at, I believe we were talking about differences in gender. We were talking about, and now I'm blanking on the word, as people grow up. We were thinking about that here. And we talked before about how different groups can have different types of aggression, right? So men tend to be more likely to carry out physical aggression. Women tend to be more likely to carry out relational aggression, right? So that was something we mentioned earlier in class as well. So the next thing we're going to look at is the biological influences on aggression. So we do know that there are things that biologically are going to influence aggression here. So there are genetic influences, neural influence, and biochemical influences. Okay, so there's different pieces, but all biological. Genetic influences. So there's two big pieces that we can point to. There's obviously probably more than this if you look really deeply, but for our purposes, there's two big things we can look at. So for example, men tend to be more aggressive than women, right? There's thus a genetic component that we can kind of connect to. In addition, we also see that people have low levels of what is sometimes called the warrior gene, which is kind of like a group of genes that we have. If they have low levels of this warrior gene, they tend to be less aggressive, right? I'm sorry, opposite. Tend to be more aggressive. Okay, so we can kind of see that connection there. Again, how genetics are connecting to violence or aggression here. The next piece is neural influences. So neural influences, again, talking about these different neural pathways. So one example we can see is stimulation of the amygdala. We've already talked about that when we were talking about the different parts of the brain, right? Talked about how the amygdala is going to be affecting aggression and fear. So if that part of our brain is stimulated, right, or is more active than others, right, we're going to be more likely to be aggressive. We also see the same thing with diminished frontal lobe activity, right? So again, we talked about this before too. When they've done brain scans of incredibly violent criminals, they tend to find lower levels of frontal lobe activity than they do in other people, right? And again, that frontal lobe is part of our decision making, something that's involved in empathy. So if there's lower levels of activity there, right, we can kind of draw that connection to why we might see higher levels of aggression. And then lastly, we have biochemical influences. So biochemical influences, there's two big examples of it. For one, we can see the example or the connection of testosterone to aggression. So people with higher levels of testosterone tend to be more aggressive than people who have lower levels. Obviously, we can also kind of draw this connection between men and women there, right? Where generally speaking, men are going to be more likely to have higher levels of testosterone than women. But we can also see, external factors like alcohol, for example. So alcohol is a disinhibitor, right? Which can then cause us to be more aggressive, right? It kind of gets rid of our inhibitions, right? That's thus disinhibitor, which might I don't want to say allow us, but might cause us to be aggressive where normally we would be more controlled. Obviously, these are not like the entire list of different things, but it's just examples of all these different ways that biology can affect aggression here. We also, though, have psychological and socio-cultural factors. So we've got biological factors that are affecting aggression. But we also have psychological and social ones. So one example is we know that aversive events that cause something like making you uncomfortable, or making you frustrated, can also evoke aggression, right? A really simple example of this, which is why I have the image on there, is road rage, right? There are plenty of people that are the nicest people in the world, and then you get in a car with them, and somebody cuts them off, and they are like screaming at people, right? Or how you can have people who never have any kind of confrontations with people, whatever, but then they're like flipping people off as they're driving around, right? So again, what we're seeing there is these aversive events then kind of can cause and evoke aggression out of people. And then also we have the frustration aggression principle, right? And again, this is pretty closely tied to what we just talked about. So what this is the principle that frustration creates anger, okay? When we create anger, anger can obviously generate aggression. Just to define frustration, because it's something we haven't really talked about specifically, the way that we're going to use it in psychology is the blocking of an attempt to achieve a goal. So again, we can connect this to driving, right? When you're driving somewhere, your goal is for you to get to where you're going to go, right? So when something blocks that goal, so let's say you get stuck in a traffic jam, right? That creates anger, right? That frustration of not being able to get to achieve our goal creates anger, which can cause aggression. Which is why if you've ever been in a traffic jam before, there's always at least some people that are like laying on their horn and screaming at people and getting out of their car, maybe even, right? that's the same kind of idea. This that they get frustrated, that frustration causes aggression or causes anger, that anger then can generate aggression, right? We can see how those steps go. We also have social learning, right? The social factor. I'm cutting off the factors a little bit. I'm just going to leave it there. So we also have social learning, right? We learn things from society. This is something we've already been talking about, right? When we talked about norms and socialization, these different aspects. So social learning is basically this idea that our reactions are more likely to be aggressive situations where where experience has taught us that aggression pays. So when I've done something aggressive and then gotten some sort of reward out of it, I've learned that's what's going to happen, right? You can think about all of our different learning examples that we could talk about here, or our operant conditioning, right? Classical conditioning. So when I'm operantly conditioned, right, I do something, I learn that aggression pays, means I'm more likely to then be aggressive in that situation again. Okay, so you can think of how that connects to all of our learning principles we already talked about. We also see this in the example or the idea that when we look at different cultures, we can also actually kind of see connections. So, for example, cultures that emphasize what could be called manly honor or just being manly and strong and those kind of different ideas, right, actually tend to have higher rates of homicide, tend to be more or have higher rates of physical child punishment, so using physical punishment to on children, as well as higher levels of or higher numbers of school shootings. So we can connect, right, this kind of cultural aspect, this cultural idea, to different acts of aggression as well in those countries or groups or cultures or whatever you want to call them. We can also then talk about social scripts. So social scripts are culturally modeled guides for how to act in different situations. Okay, so a lot of the things that we do as people, as human beings in society, come from social scripts, right? Where we see other people doing things, see other people acting certain ways, and we use those as guides for our own behavior, right? This is one of the reasons why, like, when you walk into a classroom, you look around to see what everybody else is doing, and then you kind of copy that behavior, right? They're creating a social script. So we can connect that, right, obviously, to aggression. So if we are in a culture where aggression is glorified, right, or we see it modeled a lot, obviously it's going to make us more likely to act aggressively. So for example, we can see that through different types of media. So viewing music videos or video games that include risk glorifying behaviors may increase real life risk taking. So if we watch movies or play games or whatever that encourage risk taking, we are more likely to take real life risks. We also see links between violent video games and increased aggression, as well as more hostile view towards the world. Right now, this has been like a really hot topic for research for a long time, especially since the Columbine shooting. It became a really big deal, and there's been a lot kind of done towards it. That being said, there is kind of a little bit of an in-between at this point, right? So we also see that video game sales have increased drastically, but youth violence has actually decreased. So there doesn't seem to be a kind of direct causal link there, right? Obviously, because we would expect them to kind of, increase together. So there is kind of an argument that maybe there are other factors that are actually more effective. And I actually just looked at just a little bit ago. There was a 2018. It was kind of one of the first. I think it is actually the first longitudinal study that was done looking at violent video games. And they found that over the course of an extended period of time, there actually was no change. So there is kind of a little bit of debate about why in our early research did we see this, because it was a very, very strong link that pretty much across the board, they would see increases in aggression connected with violent video games. One of the things that, if I remember correctly in the article, and again, this is just one research study, so you'd have to look at a lot more, was the possibility of maybe priming, right? Where if I'm having someone play video games and then I'm looking immediately after to see what they do, right, we might just be priming them to be more aggressive, where in a long term, right, maybe that's actually not going to be, it's going to kind of go away, right? That priming will go away, and then they will, kind of continue, and it won't cause this. So there is more research here to be done, but we can at least draw links between certain concepts of it, right? And it may not be, okay, we can specifically point to video games or whatever, but maybe we can point to broader kind of context where if my entire culture looks at this, if my entire group of people I'm around look at this way, that's going to have effects, right? And that's kind of the more social script aspect here. This last piece here we'll talk about in class is just a video that you can or cannot watch, but we'll kind of cover that later on there. And that actually wraps this one up. This is pretty short. Again, take a few moments and write a short summary about aggression, and I will see you guys next time.